In light of the national student loan crisis, parents and students continue to struggle with college choice and financial aid to avoid an unaffordable student debt load upon graduation. I've dedicated several episodes to guests who help people with that. One balancing act parents go through is educating their children while still saving and investing for a comfortable retirement. That's why in this episode of the podcast, I talk with certified financial planner Paul Compeau about how to do just that. My guest today is Paul Compeau, a certified financial planner and founding partner at Bridgewise College Planning. Since 2008, he has personally helped over 500 families across the U.S. plan for college without compromising their long-term financial goals. With a CFO-style approach, Paul empowers parents to save significantly, often $40,000 plus at top-tier schools like NYU, Boston University, Stanford, Michigan, etc. His practical, values-driven strategies help families reduce debt, lower stress, and choose the right college while protecting retirement. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Steve. Excited to be here.
With a wife that was originally from Toledo, I hope you help people get into OSU as well, not just Michigan, right?
I am a Michigan football fan at heart, so we have sent some kids to Ohio State, and it hurts me every time inside.
The Ohio State University, apparently. My nephew went there for his master's in electrical engineering. So, all right. So we're talking about uh, paying for college, which is
Absolutely.
a scary prospect these days as parents uh, looking to send their kids off. We've had a history of problems with crushing student loan debt, and they're worried about that. So, if you have a child in high school getting ready to choose a college, you have to have a financial plan. I mean, there's no use getting accepted by a college if you can't afford to go there. But what happens when families pick a college without a solid financial plan?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that could happen. For some people, very few people, it works out just fine, right? That somehow an aunt or an uncle has a whole bunch of money, or grandma and grandpa end up paying for it because they're loaded. Something like that could happen. What most people are hoping for, though, is a scholarship, right? When they have a high school student, they don't know how they're going to pay for college. Their answer is, well, our kid's going to apply for scholarships because he's a pretty bright kid. And scholarships is are awesome, and that's one of the things that you should be looking for, and you should be taking advantage of some. But less than 2% of the financial aid that's out there comes from private scholarships. So that's not going to get your bill paid for. I mean, we've worked with, you mentioned hundreds of families. The biggest one we've ever seen was 10,000 one time. The next biggest one was $2,500 one time. So those private scholarships are more of a hope than they are a plan to pay for college. So what usually ends up happening, and what the schools make very easy for you, and the government as well, is to take out loans, and loans in the kids' names. When we hear about the student debt crisis, though, Steve, this is so interesting. As you look into it, it's not as much the 20 something year olds that owe this money, it's their parents. And that's why over 60 is the leading category of growth of student loan debt, is because the parents are taking on loans. And it's so easy to take out. They're called Parent Plus loans, the parent loans for undergraduate students. Um, Crazy high interest rate. This year they're around 9%. They have over 4% upfront loan origination fees, which if anybody did that on a mortgage, that'd be like criminal, right? But that's what the federal government is offering to families as the standard way of how to pay for college. And what happens is that debt accumulates and accumulates and accumulates. We had a family got referred into us, wonderful family, upper middle class kind of income between three and $400,000. They made good income. Their son went to University of Michigan in Dearborn, so not the main campus, a little less expensive campus. Their other son, they were from Michigan, went to Michigan State. So two great public universities. Neither one is crazy expensive. I mean, the private schools, we get up and out of state, we get into that 50, 60, 70, 80, $90,000 range. These are only in the 25 to 35 range with most public universities. They paid out of their 529 because they were good financial savers. They did what they could. They paid out of their 529. They did some out of cash flow, but then they took the Parent Plus loans for the rest of it. And they actually got referred into me from a client of ours after they had paid for their two kids' college. Their Parent Plus loans, because they took a little bit each semester and it accumulated over time, they were up to $2,300 per month that they were paying on those Parent Plus loans for the 10 years right before retirement.
Hmm.
And while they have good enough income, they could figure out that debt on top of their cars, on top of their house, on top of everything else that they were doing. That's $2,300 a month that should be going into their retirement so that they can retire early,
Hmm.
right? And that's where most middle class families that don't have a great income or the cash flow needed to pay that 2 or 3 grand a month in debt, they get halfway through the first student, they get up around, 800 or 1,000 or $1,200 per month. And it's like, you remember that Price is Right game where they yell out, "That's too much," right? They just can't handle it anymore. And usually they're in the second or third year of the first student. And that's where parents really struggle because they got 3 years or 2 years into a great degree that the student is passionate about, and the school was a great academic fit. It was a great culture fit on the campus for this student, but they did forgot to plan for the financial part. And that's where they run into trouble. They either, well, I mean, who's going to have that conversation with their firstborn daughter that they can't go back to the third or fourth year of school?
Hmm.
And who's going to have the conversation with the younger siblings that not only do we not have enough money to pay for college, we don't have enough money to borrow more money for college. And that's one of the big things that if we can just press pause, we can stop, take a break, put together the financial plan first as we're developing that college list or even ahead of time. I mean, everybody says they wish they met us when they found out they were pregnant, right?
Hmm.
Or in elementary school. The problem is it's normal human nature is that problem isn't urgent. It isn't right in front of them. There's other good things that parents are spending their money on when they have elementary students. Like, they're going on vacations, they're going to sporting activities, they're doing all the good stuff that they should be doing with their kids. The saving the extra 500 or 1,000 a month for all their kids' college is not the main priority. So they might put some money towards it, but by the time they get to high school, they have 30, $40,000 ready for college, and it's a $500,000 problem for their two or three kids.
Hmm.
And that's when they end up putting the financial plan together. Um, if they do it at all. Most families, you're absolutely right, apply to the colleges, they get into the colleges, they don't know if they can afford 40 grand or 80 grand, but they know 40 grand is less. So let's have the kid pick that college, right? And that's kind of how they go about doing it. And they just figure it out. Each bill comes in and they're like, oh crap, we have another bill. What are we going to do with this one? And that's where most families have never even written down, here's how much college is probably going to cost us year by year, semester by semester. At Bridgewise here, we call it a blueprint of how that bill is going to get paid for. They've never even put down the problem, let alone how they're going to pay for it each year, each semester.
Hmm.
And that's something that that we've been able to develop that expertise just based on experience with our clients of some really cool ways, levers you can pull to put that financial plan together.
Hmm. I'm curious, just talking about monthly payments on these Parent Plus loans.
Mhm.
Uh, are do you find that your clients are paying that much even on an income contingent repayment plan on the Parent Plus loans, or are they trying to tough it out on the regular amortized loan payment?
Yeah, so it just depends on each individual's financial situation, what they're looking to do. I mean, yeah, you can do the income repayment, you can stretch it over a significant number of years, but if you're 50 when you take out your first kid's loan and you're 56 when you finish your last kid's loan, how many years would they really want to stretch that out if they're
Mm.
thinking it through, right? And that's where, I mean, Parent Plus loans end up getting paid by the estate in some cases. So you're absolutely right. There are people who are doing that. Um,
I don't think that they're paid by the estate though.
no?
The federal program with a Parent Plus loan and pretty much any loan, if the person dies, the lender dies, then so does the loan. It's
Okay.
not the estate wouldn't pay it, and
I'm sorry. That's my fault, Steve. I was thinking of bankruptcy, right? Don't they
oh
survive
yeah, bankruptcy,
bankruptcy?
yeah, they end up in bankruptcy. But yeah, that's true, and sometimes if they end up just daisy chaining one chapter 13 after another, just trying to make it manageable, and because they didn't come up with a plan.
Yeah.
So okay, so talking about Parent Plus loans and just strategizing, and another thing that, just as a side note too, that people don't fully realize, although with Parent Plus loans they're usually making payments while the child's in college,
Hmm.
but with the student taking out these loans through the direct loan program, what they don't realize is there's a grace period, there's an in school deferment, but unless that federal loan is subsidized, and definitely if it's a private loan, interest is accumulating during that deferment and then capitalizes into the loan upon graduation. So
Hmm.
you end up paying back a lot more than what you originally borrowed. And that realization, too, that people go into this, as you said, well, 40 is cheaper than 80, but they don't fully realize it could be 80 by
Yeah.
the time they start repaying it, or with interest and everything else. So, yeah, you really need a plan. So, let's talk about creating a plan. What financial facts should parents know before applications start, before they even apply to the colleges, before they even, okay, this is where you want to go, before application? And I've heard from some experts, sometimes in the sophomore or junior year, you really start thinking about this because you need more of a run up. What facts should they know to get that plan together?
Yeah, so if you're waiting till junior year, that is better than waiting till freshman year of college, but you're already behind the game. So there's financial facts that are being created, for example, on your tax return during sophomore and freshman year of high school that end up on the financial aid forms.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain moves that we need to do if we're going to have a perfect, just for financial aid at college, if we're going to maximize that, we need to make sure we're meeting them earlier than sophomore, junior year, because there's things we want to make sure happen in the tax year that's in the freshman year, so it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't show up on those financial aid formulas.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing that we look at, if we want to know what to learn about, what to become the expert in, and make sure you're good, number one is what college you're going to pick that can be very generous for with financial aid for your family. So that's going to be the first thing that you want to be the expert in if you're going to succeed in the paying for college and developing that blueprint. Because the lower we can get that bill, the better. And that doesn't necessarily mean just looking at the ones that are, 25 and $30,000. For a lot of families, the ones that are 80 and $90,000 can be even more generous with financial aid. And for a lot of middle income families, that ends up costing less than going to the public university that has very little in financial aid, but the list price is way lower.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that a lot. So number one is what college. Number two is the financial aid formulas. And there's a lot that's going to go on those financial aid formulas, both on the FAFSA and the CSS profile. You want to know what counts, what doesn't count, and exactly what goes on there. So for example, they're going to ask you on the FAFSA form, what is the total net worth of all of your investments? So I'm not asking you, Steve, but to your listeners, in your mind, imagine what is the total net worth of all of your investments?
Mm-hmm.
You would put that number down on the form and think that was an easy question. When the fine print on the form, if you read all of the supporting documents that go into it, you're not supposed to include your retirement accounts. So when you just imagine the net worth of your investments, put that number down, you might have put down the wrong number that dramatically inflates what the college thinks that your family can pay. And in a lot of schools, that's going to dramatically reduce your financial aid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's a big part of what we look at, is how those financial aid formulas work. You want to be the expert in that area. And then number three is how to develop that blueprint. So when you're developing that actual financial plan at the college, at knowing the financial aid formulas that we're going to maximize financial aid. Because number one, and sorry, first thing you want to do in a financial situation is get somebody else to pay the bill, right? So if we can get more financial aid from the government or from the university, whether that's tuition reductions, there's merit-based financial aid, there's need-based financial aid, any way we can get more money out of the university, that's step one.
Mm-hmm.
Step two is traditional financial planning. So I am a certified financial planner by trade. That's one of the things that I love to be able to help families with is going through the entire financial portfolio, not just how much you have in your 529, looking through every piece of that financial plan to find something that we can do more efficiently. So for a lot of people, what does that really look like? They have 6,000 a month going out to debt right now, and we move some things around in their financial life. We're able to figure something else different out, and all of a sudden they only have 3,500 a month going out to debt, right? Well, there's 1,500 more. There's 18 grand a year that they could help to use as part of how that blueprint is developed, how they're going to pay that college bill. So
Mhm.
that's why we need to look at everything, right?
Mhm.
So we need to not necessarily change anything about retirement, but assess where retirement is, because you know that retirement and college are competing financial things, right? If we save too much for retirement, we might not have enough to pay for college. If we don't save enough for college, we don't have enough for retirement. So
Mhm.
that's why we look at everything and develop that plan. So debts, cash flow, all of your investment assets, all of your savings, all of everything are the facts that need to be gathered in
Mhm.
order to make sure that goes. And if you want to add a little extra on top of that, you also want to look at taxes and you want to look at insurances, because if the main earner in the family dies or has a major health event where they have to come up with a bunch of money out of pocket, well, all of a sudden the college plan doesn't work, right? And that's kind of the next step, is after we figured out, okay, year by year, can we pay for college? We need to stress test that for a lot of the different what ifs that are somewhat likely to happen when we go through it. You know, when I first started financial planning, I was right out of college. I used to hope that my clients don't have emergencies, that it's going to cost them money, right? And I gave up on that a long time ago. Now I just hope it's the $3,000 things, not the $30,000 things, right? Because we know those are going to happen. But I am confident that if somebody has, two kids are going to be in college over 5 or 6 or 8 years, you're going to have three or four things happen that you didn't expect that you're going to have to pay for.
Mhm.
And that needs to be built into that financial plan for college as well.
Absolutely. Well, we were talking about financial facts to gather, and you said about the schools. If you haven't applied yet, then how do you get that? How do you know? Well, we'd like to go to school A, B, and C, but you haven't applied yet. They haven't gotten the FAFSA form. They haven't sent you a financial aid package. How do you know, in looking through and maybe picking schools, what their financial aid looks like? How they can help.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up, Steve. I always forget about that because we purchase the data from the universities and then use it against them
Okay.
to make sure our clients get enough financial aid. So we're actually able to do relatively accurate predictions based on other clients we've had at similar universities or that exact same universities, or use the general overall data for their student body to use it against it. So a couple easy ones that anyone can search. You can type in the school's name and then percentage of need met. If you type in, Steve, what's a random school other than the Buckeyes?
uh, University of Pittsburgh, where my
Awesome.
niece
So you
went.
type in University of Pittsburgh percentage of need met, they're going to tell you exactly how generous they are with financial aid. Over 90% is stellar. And there's a couple hundred schools out there that meet 100% of need for every single student who steps on their campus. We love those schools. That means they have a big endowment and a relative enough endowment to be spread between their whole student body. When you start looking at most public universities, that's going to be between 40 and 60%. So if you have a public university that's 60 or 70%, that's pretty good, but they're not going to be as generous as another school that meets 80 or 90 or 100%. So
Right,
that's
because
the first thing you can look.
that's the whole idea of public school. If you're in state, you get in-state rates. There's that, but you have to balance, as you say, what's needs based is going to be lower with a state school, and people say, "Oh, the state school is usually a better deal."
Mhm.
But if you can get into a private school that offers 90 to 100% assistance, even though it may be more expensive, it's still the better deal, right? So it
Yeah.
seems to me you shouldn't discount the private schools in your strategy.
Well, and what's crazy, Steve, is I get to talk to the kids, and it's usually right as they're picking their university. We have counselors that meet with them ahead of time to help them develop their career path and everything like that. So I'm not qualified to tell a 16-year-old what they should be doing with their life. So we have the trained professionals who do that with us. The when I talk to the kids and I ask what they're worried about financially, they're worried about mom and dad going broke or not being able to retire because they went off to university. The second thing I hear from the kids is they're worried that if they go to the more expensive university, that their parents won't have enough money for their little sibling.
Mm.
And it's just absolutely crazy to think about because we as parents, we tell our kids all the time that, hey, they're asking for another pair of tennis shoes and they already have four pairs of tennis shoes, right? And it's $100 pair of shoes. It's nothing ridiculous. And we tell them no because they don't need another $100 pair of
Right.
shoes. Well, they're listening. And as much as they keep asking us for more stuff, they're listening and they say, well, if mom can't afford $100 pair of shoes, she's not going to be able to afford a $90,000 a year university. So
Hmm.
we're going to apply at the one that's only 27,000, right?
Hmm.
And what they don't realize is that the financial aid at the more expensive university could bring it lower or even similar in cost to that state university they might have been looking for. And that's where the average discount for all schools for a first-time undergrad is
Hmm.
56.2%.
Hmm.
That means 56% off the bill is standard. You get higher numbers, and most of those high numbers come from the private universities. And
Hmm.
that's where they know in most cases they are competing with the public universities. There are some families who do pay full price, and I'm the first person to recognize that. We had a student who had awesome financial aid this year at six other colleges that at the last minute got into UCLA, didn't get any financial assistance, and she's going to UCLA because they love something about it. But that's $87,000 per year for a public university. Those are the kind of things some people do pay full price, but it's very, very rare. And that's where counting on those tuition reductions, the merit scholarships, and the need-based financial aid all add up to you need to know what the cost is at the university
Hmm.
before you apply.
Hmm.
And that's where, when we're searching out the university, Steve, this is the second time I'll say it. I'm sure there'll be two more. A right academic fit, a right cultural fit, and it needs to be the right financial fit. And figuring out what those colleges are going to cost with some predictability before you develop that colleges, before you spend hundreds of dollars on a mediocre hotel room to go visit the college, right? Before you do any of the other stuff, that goes into the college planning process, that should be part of here's how much financial aid we can expect from the university. So
Hmm.
looking at the percentage of need met is an important one. Once you get deeper into that statistics, you can see what percentage is met by free money and
Hmm.
what percentage is met by self-help. That's loans or work for in the student's name.
Hmm.
That helps you kind of influence which ones meet a high percentage of need, but they just give you a bunch of loans. Well, that doesn't help anybody. Loans just delays the problem and adds interest on top of it, right?
Right.
Um, so you look at that, and then some schools have the net price calculators on their websites where you can put in some of your basic financial information, and they'll give you I don't even want to call it estimate. They'll give you an estimate of how much financial aid you might get at that university.
Hmm.
We've found that those calculators always leave off very important data that's going to influence your financial aid significantly higher or lower, and that's why. We've had to develop our own systems of how do we get a better prediction of what those colleges are going to cost.
Hmm.
And every once in a while, we're pleasantly surprised with, 10,000 less than we predicted, right? From a particular university for a particular family. But that's where knowing what your family's profile is, knowing your student profile, what their academics are, how they're going to look on the resume, what story they're going to tell on the resume, all of that builds into the merit-based scholarship, and then knowing what's going to count on the financial aid formulas allows you to get the need-based financial aid as well.
Hmm. And it's important to know that not all schools offer needs-based scholarships. So I think Stanford's one that they're pretty much it's merit-based. So you're going to want to find out of those schools, do they offer needs-based financial aid, or is it just merit-based?
We usually see the flip of that more often than not, Steve. We see
Oh,
some schools that don't do any merit-based because they only accept like valedictorians with great test scores.
okay.
So there's very few merit-based scholarships to go around at a lot of the top tier universities, and there's
Okay.
significant need-based financial aid overall. And that's what we see more, not 100%, but a lot of times. The other thing that we're looking at and what we've seen a lot of recently, is schools that do tuition discounts. So if you're a high income family that's sending their kid off to a university, you're not like a trust fund kind of family, but you're doing well, right?
Hmm.
There's something called a tuition reduction, and Well, the best way I can explain it to parents is they're really good schools, top-notch schools, great educations, great cultures, going to be around similar kids that are all really smart. But the college knows that if they charge $0 for tuition for everybody,
Hmm.
they're not going to make their budget, right?
Right.
Also know if they charge full price for everybody, $90,000 a year, not enough kids are going to come,
Right.
right? So they need a large number of families that they give what we call tuition reductions to that get them from that 90,000 number maybe to that 40 or that 50 or that 60,000 number. So
Hmm.
we're talking tens of thousands of dollars, and you can call it scholarship, you can call it tuition reduction, you can call it whatever you want to call it. They're
Hmm.
not paying the full price at those universities. And that's one of the things we've been very successful on with negotiation and things like that with the universities is being able to achieve more financial aid because if you have what's a good way to explain it? Let's just simplify it to you have 100 families with very similar income to you and very similar bright students as that family might have. They're going to need a certain number of those students. Let's say it's 28 students from that income category to enroll in their university. And out of those, we need to average about $57,000 of tuition,
Hmm.
right? Well, out of that group of 100, we want to make sure the ones that are getting below that number getting that additional financial aid, right? So even though the first offer might have been 90,000, as things change with the university, as things could change in a client's financial life, we're able to negotiate and we're able to achieve more financial aid even after the school makes that first offer in the spring.
Hmm. These offers, from what I understand, you fill out the FAFSA form, it gets sent to the schools on your list, and then they provide you with a proposed financial aid package. That's it's almost a negotiation tactic of never accept the first offer. People don't understand you can negotiate.
Yeah.
You can say, hey, there may be financial information that's not on the FAFSA that they don't have that might influence them to give you a better deal.
Hmm.
Or from a merit standpoint, you have them competing with each other and say, look, you're my first pick, but my second pick has given me an even better deal. I'd like to go with you, but and see what they say
Well,
and see
and
what you
knowing
can
ahead of
leverage.
time which schools those are that you can pin against each other's and which ones you can't, right?
Okay.
So
Well, they have to be
that's
the same level, I would think. Yeah.
and yeah, absolutely, yeah, and that's part of what our counselors are doing with the students as they develop that college list. We'll have I'll give you an example. We have a client who grandpa went to Notre Dame. Both the kids went to Notre Dame. Damn it, my kid's going to Notre Dame, right? And has the grades, has everything to get in there. Um, Sometimes in cases like that, we'll apply to a couple competitor schools to them
Mm-hmm.
that we can use that tactic on, even though we know they're just going to Notre Dame, we just still want to get more financial aid out of the university. So
Right.
that is definitely a tactic when we're looking at where we're applying to schools. And a lot of times it works out, Steve, that those other schools that are similar, that are their competitors, that they view as their competitors, are also really good schools for that student if they didn't end up getting into Notre Dame or wherever their heart is set on. So
Right.
we want all of that to be a fit, and that's where we're trying to make a certain school a financial fit. That's one of the tactics that we use. Now that starts in freshman year when we're developing what career path is right for the kids, sophomore year when we're starting to visit the schools, junior year when we solidify that college list. That's all done ahead of time before they apply at the university. So we can meet with juniors, we can meet with seniors, and we can have a huge impact on them. But the earlier you get started, the better you're going to have in results in financial aid and how much better the financial plan is going to be. Because if there's some quick tweaks we can make that give you 1,000 a month extra to save, well, we'd rather do that for 4 years before school instead of 2 years before school.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to resources that you can marshal as well, I mean, you have the high school guidance counselor or the financial aid, um, but are they enough? How much should they rely on their high school guidance counselor or the financial aid office or a combination of both?
Yeah, great question. So you American School Counselor Association says the average counselor at a high school in America is in charge of 408 students. So somewhere between four and 500, and some of the better off communities maybe has that number around 350 or 400. But they're still taking care of hundreds of students. And unfortunately, the guidance counselors at the school, they're awesome people. I love the guidance counselors and they have great hearts and they love helping students. And that's an amazing path for some people. They only have so much time and only have so much resources. So they're putting together, most high school parents know they're putting together the kids' high school schedules every single year, every single semester. They're the ones that handle that, right? They're putting together the kids' disciplinary plans. They're putting together their IEPs for some students. They're putting together all of those different things. They're dealing with the bullying in the schools. They're dealing with this girl got in a fight with this girl at lunchtime. They're the ones that go to the counselors, right? So as they're dealing with all these social issues and everything else in there, I promise you, most high school guidance counselors would love to spend all of their time with A students who are going off to college, but they don't have the time to do it. The expectations that people have on those guidance counselors is much higher than the time they have available. So what the high school guidance counselors usually end up doing mostly is doing group activities. So they'll have a college night where they talk to all the high school students or all the upcoming juniors, talking about what a FAFSA is, talking generally how to do an application. They'll send out an email at the right time sometimes. Make sure you're getting your letters of recommendation for college next year. So they'll help out where they can, but it's always almost always in a mass group setting, right? They're nowhere near talking to the parents about how much they can afford to pay for college, let
Mhm.
alone what colleges can give good financial aid to them. They just don't have the time to do that. Some of them have the expertise, but most of them don't have the expertise. They're very good at. Some of them do well, I should say, at career guidance and looking at what careers they have a lot of tools available for that. That once again, you can go onto the website and the kid can click some things and it'll recommend a few careers that might be a good fit for them. They
Mhm.
do some of that work and they do an okay job at it, but they're not getting the one-on-one conversations about that with the student afterwards to help develop what that really means as far as education and everything else. So that's one of the big things that we found is just the high school counselors are so overworked they don't have the time. But you brought up an interesting one, the College Financial Aid Office. Um, and that's so interesting because the College Financial Aid Office, and this is something that I want to stick with the listeners out there. College is a very big, very successful business.
Mhm.
And each university, I'm not saying 100% successful, but most of them are really, really, really successful. If you look at how much money they've saved up, the endowments, all of the different things they've done, the beautiful buildings they've built, they have a lot of money, and it's not by being giving away all their financial aid. The financial aid office is the billing arm for the students of that university. They're the ones that decide how much you're going to pay. They need to fill the freshman class with a certain amount of dollars still coming into the university. So when people go into the financial aid office and they lay out all their information, they say, hey, we only have this much saved in our 529. We have three other students. We have this much in savings. We have this much here, there, and everything else. And we have this debt. They say, can you give us more financial aid? What you've done is you've just given that financial aid office and they have the exact formula of how much they could charge your family, right? So
Mhm.
while we do need to use the financial aid office to get the financial aid, going to them to get more financial aid is kind of like going to the IRS to get your taxes done. If you go to your regional office of the IRS, they might answer a couple questions. They'll help make sure you put the signature in the right place, but they're not going to be looking with a fine-tooth comb for every single deduction you can get, and they're definitely not going to help you plan for the following years,
Right.
right? And that's where, if you don't have somebody on your team, you need to develop your own expertise on how those financial aid formulas work before you're filling out the forms, and definitely before you're talking to the financial aid office about specifics with your family.
Mhm. So, uh, getting back to the FAFSA and filling it out, I know I've talked to some folks, friends that have kids that are heading towards college, and they'll say, "Have you filled out the FAFSA form?" And they'll say, "Ah, we make too much money. We're not going to get anything, any kind of aid or whatever." And I tell them, the worst they can say is no. I mean,
Right.
fill it out. This is information, as you say, that you fill out the FAFSA, that goes to the schools on your list, and then they prepare a financial aid package. So you just don't know what might or might not, and you're really closing a door that you shouldn't be. So, do you think that everybody, no matter what, should fill out the FAFSA form?
So there's been a few exceptions. So I won't say everybody, but yeah, everybody should fill in the FAFSA form. You never know what's coming up. If your family is independently wealthy, you have $20 million in the trust fund just set aside for that one kid, yeah, don't fill in the financial aid forms and you'll get through it just fine, right? But when we're talking about, families who are still working for income and have to work for their income to grow their lifestyle and everything else they want to do in life, you should absolutely be filling in the FAFSA form. So there's a few different reasons why. The biggest reason is all of the merit-based scholarships are almost all schools require you to fill in the financial aid formula, do it on time and correctly before they'll even open up the merit aid. So think about it this way. If you don't fill in those forms, the FAFSA form, one of the many things it does is that asks the federal government and the state government in most cases if you can qualify for their free money from the government or loans from the government or whatever other financial aid is available.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the university and you're a big business, a very successful business, who is the billing arm for that university, if you have a family who didn't even ask for the free money from elsewhere, do you think you would open up the university's pockets to give them free money? And the answer is obviously no. The financial aid office isn't going to open up their merit-based scholarships if you didn't even try to get the other scholarships that might be available or other forms of grants or loans or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the biggest reasons is if we're going to get a tuition reduction or merit-based scholarship, even if your income, if you're above, three or 400,000 of income and you only have one student in college, you're probably not going to qualify for need-based financial aid, right?
Mm-hmm.
If everything stays as is. But we do want to qualify for the tuition reductions and the financial aid through the merit-based scholarships, and you still have to go through the process. You still have to fill it in. The other reason that we found is I just saw a study from Boston College that was said that over the age of 50, so if you're working in your 50s and 60s, there's a 30% chance you'll get fired or laid off in the next 2 years. So there is a very high percentage of students or of parents who's going to have a change of income while their kids are in college.
Mm-hmm.
Only 1 in 10 of those people who get laid off after the age of 50 make more money afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where the high is on most people's career. 9 in 10 of them are going to get a pay cut when they do get laid off. I heard another statistic, I forgot where it was from, that over 64% of people are going to get fired or laid off between the ages of 50 and retirement. Not their choice, right? It's
Oh,
not they planned for the early retirement. And that's where, when we have that high chance of having an income change, if you didn't fill in the FAFSA form, it's very difficult. You can't go back and fill it in after the deadline. It's very hard to negotiate additional financial aid because of your lower income that now you do qualify for an financial aid, but you didn't go through their process to get it.
right.
That's where families really struggle um, as far as trying to get more financial aid. So we actually had this happen. I mean, unfortunately, we have a couple dozen families that we negotiate this financial aid on their behalf every single year because their income changed.
Mm-hmm.
And we hate doing it. It's one of our most depressing conversations we ever get to have. But as their college financial planner, we get to get them additional financial aid, at least them being laid off. And hopefully it's only for a few months. So over 50, it's usually a little bit longer than that. But as they get additional financial aid, at least the kid isn't getting pulled out of college because you lost your job. We're also having to figure out how to pay your bills and everything else in the financial plan. But because of the lower rate for college, sometimes that financial plan can work for a lot more months of being laid off than it would have otherwise if you didn't fill in that FAFSA form. So
Right.
that's a big part of it, is getting the tuition reduction and the merit and then appealing as well. So had a client, name was David. He actually had a very similar story. He worked for the same company for 30. He was a white collar worker. 30 years he worked at this company. He's about 58 years old. His second student was in college. got laid off, but his financial plan was built way ahead of time. He was on track to retire at 62. He ended up getting a severance from his employer. He didn't have to go back to work and make more money to make his financial plan work, not just for college. He could retire early because of the small severance package that he
Hmm.
got from the employer. And he started working, he was bored, so he started working as a consultant, but very part-time. And then he ended up buying his own business, and he's trying to get that startup going now. So
Wow.
but we were able, because he had built that college financial plan ahead of time that includes looking at the overall financial life as well. Within about a week after he was laid off, we already had the answer. We moved a couple numbers around. We already had the answer back to him that you don't ever have to go back to work if you don't want to. And that just completely changed his outlook on just getting laid off. So
Yeah.
just a cool way of looking at making sure that the FAFSA is filled out, making sure you have that financial plan ahead of time.
Mhm. Well, I wanted to talk to you because when I introduced you, I talked about you have a CFO style approach. And I want to talk briefly about mindset. I think a lot of the details we've already discussed, but in mindset, why do you advocate that parents and students should approach college planning like a CFO, a chief financial officer? Uh,
Yeah.
how does that mindset work?
Yeah, so it's I always like to contrast that of thinking like a CFO, not like a parent, right? So when I started doing financial planning for college, I didn't have kids. So my kids are 8 and 10 years old right now.
Mhm.
I would talk to families and I'd be like, "You guys are absolutely nuts! What you're trying to have me figure out for you because."
Yeah.
They only have so much money and they're trying to figure out whatever it is, 30 or 40 grand a year for college, and they don't have enough income to almost support that, and they're going to give up pieces of their retirement. They're going to give pieces of their home equity. They're going to give up whatever they needed to make sure this kid succeeds and gets the education they believe that they should have. And I'm like, you guys maybe shouldn't do this, right? Then I had kids, and I was in the hospital holding my son Luke for the very first time. And I took a couple weeks off, and it was then that I realized that I'm going to do anything I can to give my son an advantage in life, and now my daughter as well. And then I went back to work a couple weeks later and I kind of clicked in my head, oh, this is the feeling that these parents have, right?
Mhm.
And we would sacrifice our retirement to give in a lot of cases, to give our kids a leg up in life, right?
Mhm.
We would sacrifice our vacations. We would sacrifice all sorts of things for ourselves. I mean, how many of us sacrifice our weekends so that we can go to our kids' sports tournaments, right?
Mhm.
And as fun as that is, and we care about our kids and we enjoy watching them, like we'd rather be hanging out with our friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we do that because we care about our kids. We want our kids to succeed. We want to give them those advantages in life, but you don't have to. And that's where thinking like a parent is let's sacrifice all these things so that our kids can succeed. When I look at it with clients from a CFO perspective, it's let's plan ahead, let's assess the situation, let's adjust the situation, let's make sure that this school has that right cultural fit for the kids so that they don't transfer. Let's make sure it has the right academic fit so that they can handle the curriculum, that they can get the major they want, that they can succeed, and let's have the right financial fit, the right cost of the university so that it all fits together, right? And
Mhm.
that's what a CFO of, a large company would be doing. They're doing the forecasting. They're doing here's the budgets. Here's exactly how much we could afford if we chose to. But if we have one in this range, maybe that's a better fit. So, if you have one that's somebody's going off to mechanical engineering and they get into a top 5 school and they get into a top 20 school, what's the trade-off, right? Is
Mhm.
he actually going to get that much better of a job if he goes to the top 5 school instead of the top 20 school? Maybe, right? And in certain cases, absolutely. There's recruiters that are at certain schools that aren't. In
Mhm.
most cases, they're not going to get that much more. And that's where just having that thought process of, is this worth this much more? So I mentioned the family at earlier in the call went to UCLA. They love that the school has access to world-class arts programs that even though she's not an arts major, she can still attend those classes. She can still be involved in those programs, not as her main course of study, but she has access to some of the same professors. She has access to some of the same programs, and they love that for her, right? And that's the experience they want her to have in her education that they believe is best for her, and they're willing to pay a premium for that, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of the when we look at different families at different things that if we look at the whole picture, there are some things that are worth spending more on. There's some things that your family does not care about and doesn't, or that you think are true that might not necessarily be true. And that's why we take that CFO-like approach to finding that right fit school for each individual and then figuring out the financial plan of how to make it all happen. And that's the same as a CFO. If you're thinking about building a new building for a company as the CFO, you're looking at, okay, what is the return on this? How much money does it take? When does the cash flow have to go? You're
Mhm.
looking at all of those different pictures, but you're also looking at what is the next best option? What else could we do with these funds? All of those different things need to be part of that discussion of how is college going to get paid for. So they're also looking at, in my case with clients, looking at the retirement, looking at their emergency reserves, looking at all those other good financial planning pieces that need to all click together in order to make that college education successful.
Right. So you need to take a certain amount of, subjectivity out of it. You can't think like a parent too much because you'll lose your objectivity, and in a way you could compromise that very goal of making sure your child succeeds, because if you don't think like a CFO, that the child could uh, graduate with a whole bunch of debt, or you have spent all your money on the first child. Now the second child isn't educated, so you really have to take that emotion out of it. And you talk about whether it's a top 5 school or a top 20 school. A college classmate of mine also came from the same area, Southern New Jersey. We were both looking at law schools, and he was looking at one that was 5 times more than the other. And he said
Mhm.
to me, "Is that one going to make me 5 times better a lawyer? I don't think so." So why am I spending that much more? And he was right. And we both got a
Yeah.
good deal on law school.
Well,
So,
and if there isn't an advantage, then you're absolutely right. But we do want those subjective things inserted into that conversation to see what it is we're really trying to achieve, right?
right.
So it's like if you're approaching buying a new car, it's like you can get the cheapest car out there, but if you have six people that need to fit in the car, you might not want the smallest one out there, right? Or the cheapest one out there, right?
Right.
And those are the kind of things you need to think about what you value, what you want this to accomplish,
Hmm.
and then take those subjective things and look at them objectively of which one actually accomplishes that.
Right. Oh, value and everything else can
Mhm.
go beyond the dollar amount. You're right. You're talking about culture of the
Mhm.
school, whether they will thrive. I mean, the less expensive one may be less expensive, but they may not thrive in that environment, and then not succeed in higher education. So I just want to wrap up, and there's a lot of good stuff you talk about and how you help your clients. So any listeners out there that are looking for help and saying, "Hey, wait a minute, I need to think more about this. I need to have a plan. Maybe this guy can help me." How can folks reach out to you, and how can you help them?
Yeah, it was the Texas businessman T. Boone Pickens who said, "A fool with a plan is better than a genius with none." Right? And you see similar things in Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and many other places, right? Having that plan mapped out is absolutely crucial to making it happen. So you can search Bridgewise College Planning on Google. That's an easy way to get over to our website. Our website is bridgewisecp.com, bridgewisecp.com. So if you go to Bridgewise College Planning on Google, right on there, you'll have the advantage to take advantage of a college readiness breakthrough session. That's a 1 hour session with our professionals who are there to assess if we can take advantage of it. So we are a fee-based company. I'll be very straightforward with people. We charge anywhere between $3,000 and $8,000 per family to help them through that college process.
Mm-hmm.
When we do so, though, we're only we most people who come in for a college readiness session, breakthrough session, do
Mm-hmm.
not qualify for our services. So there's a reason we have almost all 5-star reviews. There's a reason that our life is absolutely amazing here at Bridgewise. It's because we sign on people who we can have a major impact on, and that's how we want our lives to be. That's how what we want for our clients. So if we're going to charge a fee for our services, we're ensuring that we have a major return on investment for that family
Mm-hmm.
in some way. It could be getting the student in the right school and finishing in 4 years instead of the national average of 5.8. It could be looking at that. So if listeners go to bridgewisecp.com, they'll be able to click on that link. There's all sorts of other resources on that website if you want to learn more about the college process.
Mm-hmm.
But clicking the link for that college readiness breakthrough session, will allow them to spend in 1 hour with our experts to really get to know their financial situation, get to know their student situation,
Hmm.
and see if they've mapped everything out correctly. If they've mapped everything out correctly, we're never going to charge a fee to just say you've mapped it out correctly, right? So we're
Hmm.
going to be looking if there are any pitfalls, if there's anything you've done great with your college plan, we're going to be looking through all of that and see if there are any holes that you would probably want to know about sooner rather than when your kid's walking off to you're dropping them off on campus.
Right. So the important takeaway, folks, listeners out there, is that if Paul can't help you or really add value, he'll tell you.
Hmm.
So you're not going to end up spending a lot of money and then finding out, well, I could have done this myself, you know.
Right.
So that's a good assurance that they'll get value for money. So Paul, I appreciate you coming on. A lot of good information. You've taught me some things I didn't know you could find out financial aid policies and things like that before you even apply. Just
Hmm.
Googling around. So that's a great tip. I'm sure the listeners learned a lot. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Steve, and I wish your listeners best of luck in their financial future and hopefully in their college planning as well.
Yeah.